Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
The main character, after dying in his previous life, he wakes up inside of Game of Thrones and he is reborn as the Scorpius Rex from Jurassic World. What is he gonna do inside of Game of Thrones?
Asterisk Chapter 1. A locked room without mercy. Corin chose the warehouse because it had one door, no windows below the second floor, and old brick thick enough to swallow a scream. Rain struck the roof in hard bursts and leaked through the seams, tapping rusted shelves, plastic barrels, and the steel table he had bolted to the floor. The man tied to the chair tried to breathe through a broken nose. Corin watched him count the drips and smiled, because counting was what frightened men did when they had no plan left. "Please," the man said. "I gave you the ledger." Corin set the ledger on the table and turned one page with a gloved finger. Names, numbers, routes, payments, useful things. He had built his life around useful things and useful fear. People obeyed better when they believed mercy had to be purchased in advance. He had never enjoyed crowds or warmth or any room where someone else could stand behind him. Control worked best in locked spaces. "You gave me a copy," Corin said. "You kept the original because you thought I would need you twice." The man stopped counting the rain. That tiny silence pleased Corin more than shouting would have. He walked to the wall panel and checked the switches again. Overhead lights, door magnet, camera feed, burner pump, extraction fan. Each one answered under his hand. Each one meant the room belonged to him. He liked a place where every escape had to pass through his decision first. A phone vibrated inside his coat. Corin ignored it until the third pulse, then looked down. Unknown number. He let it ring out. The tied man watched the movement with desperate attention, and Corin saw hope trying to form behind the swelling around one eye. Hope was always sloppy. It made people mistake interruption for rescue. "You should answer," the man whispered. "You should not advise me." Corin picked up a chair from the corner and set it backward across from him. He sat with his arms folded over the chair back, close enough for the man to smell the rain on his coat and the solvent on his gloves. Silence worked better at that distance. The man tried not to look at the door. Corin let him fail 3 times before speaking again. "Who else saw the original?" "No one." The answer came too quickly. Corin leaned across the chair and pressed one gloved thumb against the man's split lip. Not hard, only enough to make every breath sting. The man trembled, eyes shining under the warehouse lights, and Corin watched the lie collapse inside him before it reached words. People thought cruelty meant rage. Corin knew better. Rage wasted motion. Cruelty was patience with a purpose. "My sister," the man said. "She has a drive. She does not know what is on it." That made the room colder in Corin's mind. A second person meant a second room, a second lock, a second chance for noise. He stood and turned the ledger around, checking the delivery dates again. Outside, a truck passed through standing water, its tires hissing beyond the brick. The ordinary sound annoyed him. The world should not continue casually when he was still arranging its useful parts. The phone rang again. This time the warehouse lights flickered. Corin looked up. Water crawled along a cracked conduit above the breaker box, shining in a line that had not been there 10 minutes before. He had paid for the building in cash, paid the electrician less than asked, and threatened the inspector into signing. That memory arrived with a cold bite of irritation. Cheap work was betrayal by another name. "Stay still," Corin snapped. The room answered with a pop from the wall. Sparks fell into a thin sheen of spilled solvent near the burner pump. Blue fire ran across the floor too fast for thought. Heat climbed Corin's legs. The extraction fan coughed once and died, trapping smoke under the roof. The door magnet stayed locked because Corin had designed it to stay locked when someone outside cut power. The man on the floor was no longer begging. Corin stepped over him, slammed his shoulder into the door, and felt something break inside his chest before the door moved. Fire rolled up the wall behind him. The ledger curled black at the edges. Names vanished. Money vanished. The room kept everything he had made and fed it back to him as smoke. He dropped to one knee. His hand found the gap under the door, fingers clawing at wet concrete. He did not pray. He did not apologize. He hated the door, the rain, the electrician, the man on the floor, and the failing meat of his own body. The last thing he understood was that control could become a cage if the lock answered only itself. Then his lungs closed, the rain disappeared, and Corin fell through a dark threshold with his teeth clenched around one final, useless refusal. The fire did not kill Corin immediately. That annoyed him. He lay beside the warped door with one cheek against wet concrete and understood enough to know the room was still taking time from him. Smoke pressed low. The tied man on the floor had stopped moving. Somewhere near the burner, glass popped one bottle at a time. Corin's hand remained under the door gap. Rain touched 2 fingers. Outside. An inch away. He pulled. Nothing. The magnet had failed, but the frame had swollen inward from heat. The lock he had trusted was no longer the problem. The room itself had changed shape. That offended him more. He had built control around components. Door, fan, panel, camera. He had assumed each thing kept its definition when pressure arrived. The fire had turned every category into a lie. The extraction fan became a dead vent. The steel door became a wall. The ledger became smoke. The prisoner became a corpse. Corin became meat waiting to stop. He hated the simplicity. His phone buzzed once inside his coat. The unknown caller again. He tried to reach it. His hand missed. Buzz. Again. Whoever was calling would later become one more person telling a story about the hour Corin stopped answering. He wanted to pick up just to deny them the satisfaction. Couldn't. The screen glowed through his coat. Then dimmed. He smelled his own burned glove. The warehouse roof groaned. Corin looked toward the table. One surviving page of the ledger had fallen beneath it. A name. He could almost read. Didn't matter. He had spent years believing information survived if he controlled access. Now one page lived because it had escaped him accidentally. That irony would have made him kill someone if he'd had another minute. He tried the door once more. Shoulder. Pain. The gap widened perhaps half an inch. Rain smell stronger. Not enough. He imagined Mara receiving no call. People asking where he was. He corrected the thought. The people he had frightened would test every lock after he vanished. Some would fail. Some would discover they had never needed his permission. That possibility made him furious enough to push again. The door moved. 1 inch. Then ceiling beam fell behind him. Heat. Dark. No heroic final choice. No victim saved. No moral revelation. Just a man trying to escape the room he designed and failing, because control had made every backup answer to the same architecture. When darkness came, he did not think I was wrong. He thought, next time, more exits. That was the seed that survived him. Not goodness. Not regret. A better cage builder, learning the first principle of not dying inside the cage. Asterisk Chapter 2, Teeth in the Snow. Cold woke Corin first. It pressed against scales, slid under sparse feathers, and gathered in the cracks of stone around him. He tried to curl his fingers. Something scraped rock instead, 3 long claws flexing at the end of a forelimb that bent wrong for any human arm. Pain snapped through him when he jerked back. His skull struck the low roof of a hollow under frozen roots. He opened his mouth to curse. No word came out. A wet, broken rasp filled the cave and bounced back from stone. His tongue was too thick. His jaw opened too far. Teeth touched teeth in a jagged line made for tearing, not speech. Panic surged, hot and humiliating, and the body answered by lashing a heavy tail into the wall. Stone chips sprayed across the floor. Corin froze. The tail moved because he had wanted distance. The claws flexed because he had wanted hands. The body obeyed him badly but eagerly, like a knife tied to every nerve. He forced himself to breathe. Air entered through nostrils set above a long snout and carried more than scent. Heat pulsed in the dark. Mice under roots, a fox curled beyond the hollow, crows sleeping in branches, old blood under snow. Every living shape burned inside his skull. Hunger woke beneath those lights and dragged a line of saliva from his teeth. No one could hear the human part. The thought arrived slowly and settled harder than the cold. He could think his name. Corin. He could remember smoke, a jammed door, rain beyond reach. He could not make the mouth shape a single human sound. Whatever this body was, it had taken language away and left appetite in its place. He crawled from the hollow one limb at a time. The shoulders were wrong, high and uneven. His back carried ridges and folded quills that lifted when a branch snapped nearby. Each spine tugged at tender skin. Venom sacs pulsed at their bases, tight and limited, warning him that even this monster had resources it could waste. He found a frozen puddle under the roots and lowered his head toward it. The reflection broke around his breath, then steadied enough to show a long skull, uneven eyes, a mouth too crowded with teeth, and a body built like a nightmare assembled from hunger. Corin stared until the surface cracked. The face did not become human. It only watched him back with his own attention. He tried to make marks in the mud beside the puddle. One claw gouged a crooked line. A second claw split the first mark apart. He could scratch, slash, and claim, but he could not write a sentence. The loss enraged him more than the teeth. Teeth were useful. Silence was a locked door from the wrong side. A fox bolted from a snowbank. Corin's head snapped after it before he chose to move. The body wanted to chase, and for 3 wild steps it nearly did. He slammed one claw into a root and stopped himself, wood cracking under the pressure. No, small meat could wait. First he needed to understand what obeyed and what only pretended to obey. He raised his quills one at a time until the motion stopped feeling like a shiver and started feeling like a weapon. The skin along his back burned where each spine lifted. When he forced them down, 2 stayed half-cocked and leaked black venom onto the snow. Waste. He scraped snow over the drops and memorized the mistake. Snow fell through the wolfswood in patient sheets. Pines stood black against a dawn that had not yet reached the forest floor. Corin tasted the air again and found horse sweat, old leather, iron, and a deer thrashing somewhere close. The deer kicked against a snare left by hands that were not nearby. Its panic beat through the roots. He moved toward it. The first step stumbled. One foot sank too deep, tail swung wide, shoulder struck a trunk. Bark split under the impact. Corin hissed, then tried again with his weight lower. The body learned faster than pride liked. By the 10th step, snow barely whispered under him. The deer saw him and screamed. Corin stopped, startled by how good the sound felt. Fear had weight here. It filled his mouth before blood did. He circled the trapped animal and watched the rope, the branch angle, the torn snow, a human trap, crude but useful. The world had tools. He did not have hands. He lunged. Claws entered muscle. The deer's ribs shuddered under his bite, warm blood flooding over teeth built to make that warmth inevitable. Hunger tore at him until thought narrowed to meet, pulse, swallow, breathe. He hated how easy it was to lose himself and hated more that the loss felt good. When the body was still, Corin dragged it back toward the hollow by the neck. The tail balanced him. The claws found purchase. Quills brushed bark and left black beads of venom steaming in the cold. He stopped to stare at the marks. Warning, border, claim. A raven called above him. Corin lifted his head and answered with a rasp that was not speech, not laughter, and not any animal noise he knew. The bird fled. He watched it go and understood the first useful truth of the new world. He did not need language to make others carry his message. He fed until the ache in his belly quieted. Then he pushed the carcass bones into the cave mouth where anything following the blood would see them. Not hidden, displayed. Smoke and rain belonged to the life that had ended. Snow, meat, and fear belonged to this one. Inside his skull, where no throat could betray him, Corin formed the thought with deliberate care. I am still here. The forest gave no answer. That was fine. Answers could be taken later. The first thing Corin learned about the Scorpius body after feeding was that it could not sit still. Not psychologically. Physically. Muscles along the spine twitched when sense changed. The tail adjusted balance even at rest. Quills rose in tiny involuntary responses to distant sounds. The body was always voting. Corin hated democracy. He spent the morning suppressing movements. Tail flat. Quills down. Jaw closed. Breathing slow. A rabbit crossed the hollow. The head turned before he allowed it. He forced it back. Again. Bird above. Eye moved. Eyes could track. Body not lunge. A fox approached deer bones. Hunger surged. Corin held. The fox took one strip. His claws buried in soil. He let it leave. Control practice. Then pain. The venom sacs along his back, cramped from being held down too long. Interesting. Suppression had cost. The body was not a machine that obeyed indefinitely without feedback. He adjusted. Not never react. React within chosen limits. Quills may rise. No firing. Tail may balance. No strike. Head may track. No chase. Rules. He hated that rules sounded like compromise with flesh. Still worked. By afternoon, he could smell prey without lunging automatically. Then hunger crossed threshold. Everything changed. Focus narrowed. Rules became weaker. He needed food before control degraded. Resource planning again. He killed hare. Small. Not satisfying. Enough to think. So hunger itself became clock. He mapped signs. Saliva. Jaw pressure. Heat fixation. Tail twitch frequency. When three appeared together, hunt before decision quality collapsed. A human criminal in first life might have mocked the idea of schedule around appetite. Human Corin scheduled everything else. He found a second frozen puddle and studied reflection. The face still wrong. Uneven eyes. Feathers. Quills. Teeth. He tried to smile. The mouth produced nightmare. Fine. Fear tool. He tried softer posture. Impossible. Fine. Then a crow landed near deer remains. It watched. Corin watched back. The bird hopped closer. He snapped once without striking. Crow flew. Message. He tested vocal sounds. Rasp. Click. Low growl. High screech hurt throat. No words. Could vary. He repeated click twice. Then once. Patterns. Potential code. But code only matters if another understands. He had no one. Speech had always allowed others to negotiate. Silence reduced their tools too. The drawback. No commands. No lies. No deals. He would need action grammar. Marks. Placement. Distance. Repetition. The black quill warning language began here. He scraped 3 lines en route. Different depths. He kicked snow. Erased. Do not build language before audience. First rule. At dusk, he climbed tree successfully. Earlier body struggled. Now claws found bark. Tail counterbalanced. He looked over Wolfswood. Smoke from farms. Winter fell far. Roads. Humans. The body smelled them as heat clusters. The mind saw systems. Food. Threat. Witnesses. Tools. Corin disliked the word people because it brought old moral expectations he did not share. Still, people behaved differently from prey. He would learn those differences. Below, Fox returned to deer bones. Corin let it eat again. Not mercy. He was full. The distinction stayed important to him. The world did not need to agree. Asterisk Chapter 3. Meat under pine branches. The elk had been wounded before Corin found it. Blood darkened the snow beneath one hind leg, and every breath came with a wet hitch that made the animal slow enough to tempt hunger. Corin followed the scent through the wolfswood until the trees opened around a frozen stream. 2 humans were already there. The father carried a bow and a skinning knife. His daughter carried a snare pole too large for her arms. They had not seen Corin. They had seen the elk and were whispering about the meat, the weather, and whether the wound had come from a wolf. Corin watched them from beneath a pine. The body wanted the elk first. The mind wanted to know how the humans moved when they believed themselves safe. The father stepped onto the ice. It cracked. The girl caught his sleeve, and he turned toward her instead of the sound. Corin remembered that choice. The human had looked back for his child before looking for danger. Corin struck the elk from the side. Claws opened the wounded flank. The animal screamed and collapsed against the stream bank. The father loosed an arrow on instinct. It buried itself in the snow where Corin's head had been. The girl stumbled backward, fell, and stared at the shape rising over the elk. Corin could have killed both. The father had a weapon. The girl had seen his face. Hunger argued for speed. Curiosity held the argument open. The father raised the knife. "Run, Elin." The girl did not run. Her gaze moved over Corin's uneven shoulders, the quills lifting along his back and the black fluid beading at their tips. She looked frightened, but not stupid. She understood that the thing before her was deciding. Corin lowered his head until one yellow eye filled her world. He dragged a claw through the bark of the nearest pine, then turned the mark toward the father. The father understood the threat without understanding its language. He pulled Elin behind him. Corin lunged at the elk again. The father released another arrow. This one struck Corin high in the shoulder and snapped against bone. Pain made the predator inside him surge. He crossed the distance, knocked the bow away, and pinned the man in the snow with one claw resting against his throat. Elin screamed. The sound pleased the body and warned the mind. Corin looked at the girl, then at the blood beneath his claw. He moved the claw aside. Not mercy. A message carried farther by a living mouth. The father dragged his daughter away. He did not stop looking back until the trees swallowed them. Corin fed beside the frozen stream, leaving the arrow in his shoulder until the humans were gone. Then he snapped the shaft, pulled it free, and watched the wound close slowly around the splintered pane. Elin reached the first farm before night and told the story in fragments. Her father corrected her twice, then stopped when he saw the blood on her palm. By morning, the hunters had chosen 3 explanations: a demon, a diseased bear, or a very large wolf. None explained the deliberate mark in the pine. Corin heard the rumor carried from cabin to cabin and recognized the first shape of his power. People were beginning to protect his territory for him. By nightfall, the first rumor had crossed 2 farmsteads. A black-spined wolf had spared a girl after showing her a tree. Corin listened to the distant voices and tasted the difference between being hidden and being feared. The father came back to the frozen stream at noon. Not with dogs. Not with men. With Elin. That surprised Corin enough to keep him still beneath the branches. The man carried no bow this time. A knife hung at his belt, but the sheath was tied shut with red twine. Elin carried a small bundle wrapped in wool. They stopped beside the pine Corin had marked. The father looked into the trees. "I know you are there." Corin did not move. Elin unwrapped the bundle. Dried venison. Not much. Enough to be deliberate. Her father whispered, "Put it down." She did. Then she looked toward the tree where Corin waited. "You left us alive." The words were simple. Dangerous. Humans made gratitude into obligation too easily. Corin had no interest in being thanked into a relationship he had not chosen. He stepped from shadow. The father went rigid. Elin did not. She was afraid. Corin could smell it, but her fear had changed since the stream. It no longer erased curiosity. Corin approached the bundle. He sniffed. No poison. No strange herbs. Meat. He looked at the father. The man raised both empty hands. Not a trap. Corin's tail moved once. The father swallowed. Not this time. Better answer. Corin nudged the meat aside. Elin frowned. You don't want it. He had eaten. That was not the point. He dragged one claw through the snow between them. A line. Elin looked down. The father understood first. Do not cross. Corin looked at him. The man stepped back. Elin remained on the other side. Then she placed the bundle exactly against the line without crossing it. Corin stared. Clever. She had accepted the boundary without retreating from the interaction. He took one strip of meat. Not all. Elin smiled. Her father did not. What do you want? He asked. Corin looked toward the forest. The question assumed desire could be made legible. Food. Territory. Safety. Revenge. Those were human categories too. He moved to the marked pine and raked 3 shallow claws beneath the old scar. Then pointed his snout toward the road. The father watched. No hunting past the mark. Corin remained still. The man tried again. No traps. Corin tapped the scar. Then the road. The father nodded slowly. No traps inside the marked trees. Elin looked between them. Then what if a wolf comes? Her father whispered, Elin. Corin considered. He had no claim on wolves. No reason to protect every human who obeyed his boundary. He scraped one claw through the line and made a second mark beside it. Not answer. Complication. Elin crouched. People stay out. Animals don't care. Corin lowered his head. The father stared at his daughter. You understand it. No. She looked at Corin. I think he doesn't lie. That was wrong. Corin had already learned false trails. But he liked the distinction she was reaching for. He did not promise what he would not give. The father removed something from his coat. The broken arrowhead from the first encounter. He placed it beside the meat. Yours. Corin looked at it. The weapon had belonged to the father. The wound had belonged to Corin. Ownership after violence was not simple. He pushed the arrowhead back across the line. The man understood something else. Kept it. Before leaving, Elin asked, Can I come back? The father closed his eyes. Corin stared. He could not say yes. Could not say no with words. So he looked at the line. Then at her. Then walked away. The answer was conditional. That was the most honest answer available. Elin returned a week later. Alone. Corin smelled her before she reached the first marker. He was angry. Not because she came. Because alone meant the father had either allowed danger or failed to stop her. Elin carried no meat. No weapon. only a piece of blue cloth. She tied it to a branch outside the line. For me. Corin watched. Not for you. She sat in the snow beyond the mark and talked. About Winterfell. About a kennel boy. About the Meister measuring venom. About how people now avoided the southern trapline. Corin understood names imperfectly, but tone and repetition built a map. She was giving information without knowing its value. He let her. When she stood to leave, a wolf appeared behind her. Not direwolf. Lean. Hungry. Elin froze. Corin smelled it too. The wolf crossed his marked line. Animals did not care. Corin moved. The wolf saw him and fled before contact. Elin stared. Corin did not approach her. He stood inside the boundary. She stood outside. The rule had not changed. Still, she had survived because he happened to be there. That difference mattered. Elin left. By spring, locals began calling the marked pines the Black Line. No lord had declared it. No parchment named it. Travelers simply stopped setting traps beyond those trees. Corin had created a border without speech. And because Elin understood the condition better than most adults, she became the first human who crossed near it without believing she owned what lay beyond. Chapter 4. The Witness in the Trapline. The father returned before dawn with 3 dogs, a rope coil, and the stubbornness of a man who had spent the night explaining fear to himself. Corin smelled him long before the party reached the stream. The daughter was not with him. Good, the father had learned one lesson. The dogs had learned none. They pulled at the leashes, noses low, until the first black quill caught their scent. One animal whined. Another barked toward the trees. The largest kept coming because the rope in the man's hand told it that courage was a command. Corin climbed. His claws found the pine's rough face. The climb hurt his shoulder where the arrow had struck, but height made the trapline legible. The father had set a loop beneath the snow and hidden a second rope between 2 roots. He had chosen the clearing because it left Corin only 3 clean approaches. Corin chose the 4th. He dropped behind the largest dog. The animal turned too late. One claw opened its neck, and the other 2 dogs screamed against their leashes. The father fired a short hunting bow from the hip. The arrow scraped Corin's ribs and lodged in the dead dog's collar. The man let go of the rope. That was the correct decision. It made him more interesting. Corin drove the second dog into the snow and pinned it without killing it. The animal's heat thrashed under his claw. The father stood frozen, knife in hand, trying to decide whether saving the dog would create an opening. Take it, Corin's mind supplied, though the mouth gave only a low, clicking rasp. The father understood the movement. He stepped forward. Corin released the dog and struck the man's wrist. Bone cracked. The knife fell. The final dog fled into the trees, dragging its broken leash behind it. The father stared at his hand. What are you? Corin could not answer. He disliked the question because it assumed an answer could be traded for safety. He seized the man's cloak, dragged him across the snow, and stopped beside the loop trap. The rope tightened around a branch as Corin pulled. The hidden mechanism sprang shut on empty air. The man looked from the trap to Corin's quills. Understanding arrived in pieces. The beast had seen the plan, chosen around it, and brought him close enough to demonstrate the failure. Corin pressed one quill against the man's cheek without firing it. The point left a bead of venom that smoked against the frost. Then he turned away. The man crawled until the trees hid him. Corin let him live because a witness could carry more terror than a corpse, and because the daughter had been clever enough to leave the first time. The wounded trapper did not tell the truth to the men who found him. He said the dogs had panicked and that the beast had vanished in smoke. He kept the bead of venom on his cheek beneath a strip of cloth, refusing to let Lewin examine it. Fear had made him a witness, but pride made him a liar. Corin watched from the tree line as the man's lie sent the next search party toward the wrong clearing. Before sunrise, Corin dragged the dead dogs to the edge of the trapline and arranged them facing the path home. He did not know the names of the men who would find them. He knew exactly what they would imagine. The trapper's lie created a worse hunt than the truth would have. He told Winterfell the beast vanished in smoke. Men believed smoke frightened it. So they brought smoke. Green wood. Wet leaves. Pitch. Anything that made thick, choking clouds. Corin smelled the first test from half a mile away. He withdrew. Not fear. Memory. The warehouse. The dead fan. Smoke trapped under roof. His body lowered before his mind made the decision. That angered him. The men saw movement. Drive it. Smoke rolled between the trees. Corin retreated deeper. The trapper, wrist splinted, cheek scar hidden, stood behind the line. He had returned. Pride. Of course. Keep the smoke low. The men obeyed. Corin climbed. Smoke rose anyway. Branches trapped it. His heat sense blurred. The body wanted open ground. The men wanted exactly that. Corin stopped. If he followed instinct, they owned the route. He closed one eye. Then the other. Vision reduced. He used sound. Boots. Coughs. Dogs. Wood cracking. He moved sideways through the canopy. The men kept pushing toward the last place they had seen him. He circled behind. The trapper never noticed. Corin dropped beside him. The man turned, saw the face from inches away, went pale. Corin did not strike. He looked at the smoke, then at the man. The trapper understood. His lie had become a weapon used by others. Corin dragged one claw down the man's splint. Not skin. Wood. The splint fell open. Then Corin shoved him toward the smoke line. The man stumbled into his own hunters. Behind. Too late. Corin attacked the smoke piles. Tail scattered wet brush. Claws broke braziers. One pitch pot overturned. Flame ran backward. Men shouted. Smoke changed direction with heat. Their tool became disorder. Corin stayed above it. One dog followed, sent upward and barked. An archer fired. Arrow grazed Corin's flank. He crossed the branch. Dropped on the archer. Pinned. Did not kill. The man stared at him. Corin breathed smoke into his face. Then let him go. The hunt collapsed. No bodies. Several wounds. Burned supplies. Broken confidence. The trapper sat in snow, holding his wrist. Ned arrived later. He looked at the ruined smoke piles. Then at the man. You said smoke drove it away. It did. Once. The trapper swallowed. Ned looked at Lewin. The Meister crouched beside a blackened claw mark. It learned. That sentence traveled through every hunting party after. Not demon. Not dumb beast. Learns. More dangerous than either. Corin returned to the old den after nightfall. The smoke smell lingered. He hated it. He forced himself to remain. Not because safe. Because abandoning the den would let memory choose territory. He slept badly. Dreamed of the warehouse. Woke with claws buried in stone. The body had tried to dig. Escape. He stopped. He inspected the den like a room. 3 exits. Ventilation. No lock. No single point of failure. The comparison was obvious enough to irritate him. His first life had died inside control architecture. His second body had begun choosing dens by escape architecture. He did not call that fear. It was useful fear. He modified the den, cleared another vent, opened a narrow crawl path through roots, marked the smoke direction. When Alin visited weeks later, she noticed the new opening. You made another door. Corin froze. The word door reached something human and ugly. Alin did not know. She pointed. Safer. Corin looked at her. Then the opening. The girl smiled. Father says walls make us safe. Corin remembered the warehouse. He scraped one claw across stone. Alin interpreted badly. Not always. Better than most adults. Corin moved away. The den remained. The smoke did not own it. Neither did the memory. Asterisk Chapter 5. Quills left in bark. Corin discovered that venom was not a single weapon. It was a resource with a temper. He fired the first quill into a dead pine. The spine buried itself beneath the bark, and black fluid spread in a slow fan. The tree did not move. The poison did. A dark stain widened around the impact until the wood softened and split. The second quill struck a wolf that had followed the smell of elk. The animal collapsed before it reached him. Corin watched the tremors, counted the breaths, and waited for the body to become still. The sacks along his back burned afterward. 3 quills had emptied. Only 2 had grown back by nightfall. Not infinite, then. He dragged a boar beneath the marked tree and used the corpse as a test of time. The first hour brought stiffness. The second brought a grey film over the eyes. By dawn, the meat was spoiled around the wound, but edible farther away. Corin ate the clean portions and left the poisoned flesh exposed to the snow. A kennel boy found the carcass before the snow covered it. The boy came with an older woman and a sack of kindling. Corin watched them stop at the tree. The woman held the boy's shoulder when he reached toward the black spine. Do not touch it. It is only a thorn. Then let the thorn keep its dead boar. The boy looked at the claw marks on the bark. He followed them until they ended above his head, where Corin clung to the trunk in shadow. The boy's mouth opened. Corin lowered one quill. The woman dragged him backward. She did not scream. That restraint made her worth remembering. The boy did scream when Corin dropped from the tree on the far side of the clearing, not attacking, merely landing where they could see the tail, the ridged back, and the mouth built for meat. They ran toward Winterfell. Corin marked another pine after they left, then another. He placed the signs where paths narrowed, where snow hid tracks, and where a sensible traveler would turn around before curiosity became a choice. At dusk, a raven landed on the highest branch and pecked at the blackened bark. Corin climbed toward it. The bird escaped, but one feather drifted down and stuck to the venom stain. He left the feather there. The kennel boy returned 2 days later with a knife and a companion twice his size. They stopped at the outermost mark and did not cross it. Corin could have driven them away with a rasp. Instead, he let them retreat carrying the same warning they had brought. A border that required no guard was better than a border defended every night. The forest was learning his grammar one frightened decision at a time. By the next morning, small folk had given the marked ground a name they spoke only indoors. Corin could not hear the word clearly from the trees, but he understood the tone. A border had become a story, and the story was beginning to protect his den. The poisoned pine became a pilgrimage for stupid boys. 3 came in 1 week. The first touched nothing. The second threw a stone. The third tried to cut the black quill from bark with a knife. Corin was watching. The knife touched venom residue. The boy's hand went numb before he finished sawing. He dropped blade. Panicked. His friend ran. The third remained because fear froze his legs. Corin dropped behind him. The boy screamed. Corin could smell numb hand worsening. Not fatal yet. He understood venom better now. Tail quill type. Slower. Local. He nudged the dropped knife away. The boy stared. He points toward road with snout. Leave. Boy runs awkwardly. At village, Lewin later treats. Survives. Now story. Beast poisoned boy, but let him run. True enough. Parents want burn trees. Ned forbids fire without plan. Then kennel boy from original returns. He sees poisoned pine. Does not cross. Instead hangs wooden board outside line. A rough drawing. Quill. Hand. X. Warning sign. Corin looks. Human translated his boundary into their symbol. Interesting. Travelers begin understanding without seeing venom. The board reduces accidents. Corin's border now maintained by human sign. He did not ask. If leaves, humans become co-authors. If destroys, more injuries attract hunts. He leaves. Practical. Then another board appears farther out, placed by merchant. Same symbol, but 10 paces beyond actual mark. Expanding danger zone without Corin. He notices. Could benefit. But human control over his border. He tears second board down. Leaves first. Distinction. Original corresponds to his chosen line. The villagers see. They infer monster understands board placement. Fear rises. Ned receives report. Lewin says. It distinguishes one sign from another by place, if not image. Ned asks. Could be sent. Could. No overclaim. Merchants start asking where safe line exactly. A tiny economy emerges. Guides. Some falsely claim knowledge. One guide leads travelers too close to charge money. Corin attacks guide, not travelers. Guide repeatedly crosses marks and creates noise. Travelers flee. Guide dies. Rumor beast punishes liars. Wrong moralization. Actually punishes boundary exploitation. Tyrion later may hear. Corin cannot control myth. Humans still adapt. The black line becomes cultural. Children told not cross. Hunters resent. Poachers intentionally cross as rebellion. One dies. Ned has political problem. Lord's authority versus monster border. So he frames as safety closure. Restricted hunting ground. Corin doesn't know wording. Behavior same. Institution converts fear boundary into law without acknowledging sovereignty. Corin gets fewer intrusions. He accepts. His territory is partially upheld by Stark order. No treaty. No ownership. Pure mutual convenience. Until royal party disrupts. Asterisk Chapter 6. Lewin measures the venom asterisk. Meister Lewin laid the quill on a slab of slate and refused to touch it twice. The dead dogs lay beneath cloth in the yard. Their tongues were dark, their gums grey, and the muscles around the punctures had hardened before the rest of the bodies. A torn cloak rested beside them, its wool eaten through in a narrow black trail. It is poison, Catelyn said. Poison is a category, not an answer. Lewin dipped a glass rod into the residue and placed one drop on a strip of meat. The surface tightened. It acts quickly, but the tissue damage continues after the heart stops. Ned stood at the table with one hand on the pummel of his sword. Can it be treated? Not with anything we keep in Winterfell. Perhaps with milk of the poppy, if the wound is small and help arrives immediately, if the barb remains. Then cut it out, Jory Castle said. Lewin looked at him. If the barb breaks, you may spread the poison farther. The room fell quiet. Servants waited beyond the door, pretending not to listen. Corin watched them from the roofline across the yard, hidden behind snow and chimney smoke. He could smell fear on wool, iron on the guards, and the bitter herbs clinging to Lewin's sleeves. Ned ordered the quill sealed in wax and placed inside a locked chest. Lewin objected that the container might not hold the venom. Ned answered that an unsecured danger was worse than an imperfect one. No one hunts it alone, Ned said. No one burns the forest. Torches in pairs, dogs behind shields, and ravens to every holdfast on the Wolfswood Road. If it is clever enough to choose targets, Catelyn said, it may be clever enough to learn the pattern. Corin lifted his head at that. Ned looked toward the window. For one breath, Corin thought the Lord had seen him. Then a servant dropped a bucket in the yard, and every human turned toward the noise. Corin moved along the roof and found the scent of the sealed chest through stone. He could not reach it. He could reach the stable, the kennel, the Raven Tower, and the men who would carry the orders into the forest. The humans had tested his venom. Now they had offered him a map of their response. Lewin bent over the slate again. There is intelligence in the distribution of the quills. It did not fire wildly. Do not give it a mind you cannot prove, Ned said. Lewin kept the sealed quill beneath 3 locks, but he also kept a sketch of it beneath his pillow. Corin saw the Meister wake before dawn and write measurements by candlelight. The old man did not worship the unknown or dismiss it. He prepared. Corin disliked him for that, though the dislike carried a thin edge of respect. The next experiment would have to be something a careful man could not reduce to a table. Corin watched the Meister's hand pause above the poison. He would give them proof, not of speech or reason, only of choice. Lewin's sealed quill became a problem because it changed the wax. Not immediately. 3 days after storage. The wax around the tip darkened, then softened, then began creeping toward the iron latch. Lewin noticed before anyone else. He moved the chest into the yard. Ned watched. I don't know. Then why move it near men? Because I know what happens if it reaches wood. They placed the chest on stone, opened remotely with hooked pole. The quill lay inside. Black, dry-looking. The wax around it had become grey paste. Lewin leaned closer. Still active. Jory said, burn it. Lewin looked at him. Maybe. Corin watched from a roof. He had followed the scent of his own venom. Interesting. The humans had preserved the quill long enough for the poison to alter storage. He had not known it did that. Lewin placed 3 materials near it. Wood, leather, iron. No contact initially. Then with tongs, a tiny drop. Wood softened. Leather hardened. Iron discolored but held. The Meister wrote. Corin learned with him. Also useful. Ned said, if it can remain dangerous for days, every battlefield becomes poisoned after it leaves. Lewin nodded. Potentially. Catelyn entered the yard. Then stop keeping it in the castle. Lewin looked at her. Where? Outside. The answer was simple. Corin approved. They built a stone shed beyond the inner wall. No wood shelves. No leather handles. Tools iron. Water trench. Lewin's quarantine. The Meister refused to call it that because disease was not proven. Everyone else did. Corin returned at night. The shed smelled of stone, old wax, and his own quill. He circled. Door locked. One small vent. Could enter through roof with effort. He did not. Instead, he left a fresh quill outside. Not fired. Shed skin had released it naturally. Less venom. Different. Lewin found it at dawn. He stared. Ned joined. It came here. Yes. Why? Lewin looked at the second quill. Because it knows what we're doing. Ned's face hardened. Or because we're teaching it. They almost stopped research. Corin wanted to see which choice they made. Lewin said, then we continue carefully. Ned stared. You want to teach the creature its own poison. We are learning too. And if it learns faster. Lewin looked toward the woods. Then ignorance will not make us safer. Corin respected him more. That was inconvenient. The second quill behaved differently. Less corrosive. More numbing. Corin had never distinguished. He began. Back in forest, he fired different quills into boar carcass. Outer back. Inner fold. Tail ridge. Effects varied. Lewin had given him a question. Corin answered through prey. Outer quills, fast paralysis. Inner tissue damage. Tail weaker, longer numbness. He had been wasting specialized weapons. The body knew enough to produce differences. The mind had not asked. Now it did. Weeks later, hunters encountered a dead wolf with 3 quill types pinned into nearby trees. Lewin found report. The Meister looked at Ned. It is experimenting. Ned's expression became worse. Corin listened from roof again. He had turned human research into his own weapon education. But the humans had also learned one crucial defense. Do not pull quill immediately. Immobilize. Cut around if needed. Do not crush. A trapper survived because of that protocol. Corin noticed. His old reliable poison was becoming less absolute. A weapon that remained unbeatable became habit. A weapon challenged became skill. He began aiming more carefully. Not firing because fear suggested. Firing because effect chosen. Lewin unknowingly had improved him. Corin decided the Meister deserved a better test. One no table could simplify. He waited. Chapter 7. Ned orders torches. The hunting party left Winterfell afternoon, when the snow glare was worst, and the men believed daylight favored them. Ned rode in front. Robb carried the bow. Jon watched the trees instead of the road. Theon kept making jokes that died when no one laughed. Behind them came 6 men with shields, 4 dogs, and enough torches to turn the wolfswood into a line of wounded stars. Corin followed from the branches. He had learned the sound of iron before he learned the names of the men wearing it. Ned's armor moved with a steady weight. Robb's horse snorted whenever Corin shifted. Jon looked back more often than the others, not because he saw the beast, but because he felt the forest refusing to be empty. At the marked pines, the dogs broke formation. One pulled toward the black bark. Another tucked its tail and tried to crawl beneath a shield. Hold them, Ned ordered. Theon laughed once. Perhaps the monster dislikes dogs. Corin dropped a quill into the snow beside him. Theon stopped laughing. Corin struck the rear torchbearer first. He did not kill the man. His tail swept the legs from under him, and the torch rolled into a patch of powder. The nearest dog lunged at the movement. Corin caught it by the neck and threw it into the second man. The line collapsed exactly as he had expected. Robb shouted for shields. Jon moved toward the fallen men instead of toward the trees. Ned raised his sword and held the formation together by force of voice. That was the difference between a hunting party and a mob. Corin took a horse. A spear struck Corin's side. The point glanced off a rib but opened the skin. He answered with a swipe that threw the spearman into a tree. The man lived. Corin wanted the others to see the difference between a wound and a victory. "Back," Ned shouted. "Back together." They obeyed. Even Theon obeyed. Corin climbed the wounded pine above them and watched Ned count heads. The Lord's face held anger, but not panic. Rob had blood on his glove from the fallen torchbearer. John stared into the branches until their eyes nearly met. Corin withdrew before the moment became useful to them. He left the stolen horse wandering at the edge of the road, its saddle cut open and one black quill pinned through the leather. Ned's party returned with the stolen horse limping behind them. Rob wanted another search before sunset. Ned refused, not because he believed the beast safe, but because he knew a wounded enemy was most dangerous when cornered. Corin heard the order from the branches and remembered the Lord's voice. The humans were beginning to learn that pursuit was a choice. He would make them pay whenever they chose badly. Ned would understand that the forest had not been searched. It had been studied. Ned's second torch hunt never reached Corin, because Corin attacked the supplies first. 3 nights before departure, he entered the outer storage yard. Not Winterfell proper. A hunting lodge near the Wolfswood edge. Torches stacked dry. Oil sealed in clay. Dog food. Bandages. Spare bowstrings. Corin smelled every category. He did not destroy all. That would reveal purpose too quickly. He took bandages. Left oil. Tore half the bowstrings. Poisoned none of the dog food. Moved torches from one shed to another. Small changes. The party departed unaware. 2 hours in, first bowstring snapped. Coincidence. Second. Suspicion. Then a wounded man discovered no bandages. Ned stopped. Back. Theon protested. For bandages. For the fact that someone took them. John looked at the packs. Not someone. Corin watched from ridge. The hunt turned around without seeing him. No attack. No quill. No dramatic fear. Just logistics. Tyrion would have appreciated. Ned did. At lodge, Jory inspected. No human footprints. Claw mark on roof beam. Rob stared. It came here before us. Ned looked at the supplies. It chose what to change. That was worse. They rebuilt storage. Iron bars. Raised shelves. Guards. Corin had made the hunt more expensive without bleeding anyone. He liked this. The next attempt used distributed caches. Smaller. Separate. One compromised would not ruin all. Corin found only one. Humans adapted. Again. He attacked the march instead. Not people. Dogs. He stayed downwind and released one empty quill into a tree. Dogs smelled venom. Panicked. Handlers slowed. Formation stretched. Then Corin showed himself on left ridge. Men shifted. He vanished. Right ridge. Shift. Not attack. Make them spend energy. 4 hours. By dusk, humans exhausted. Ned called retreat. Theon furious. We didn't even fight it. Ned said that was the fight. Corin heard. The next hunt would need fresh horses. More food. More guards. Fear turning into cost. Winterfell had resources. Finite. Corin did too. Game became economics. He learned to count torch smell, horse fatigue, dog fear, human patience. Ned learned to count quill regrowth, Corin's injuries. Reigned. Both began studying each other as systems. John noticed first. This isn't hunting anymore. Rob asked, what is it? John looked into trees. A border war. Ned heard. Did not like. Because border wars imply both sides possess ground. Calling beast enemy ruler would elevate it. Calling animal ignored intelligence. Language problem. Lewin suggested territorial predator. Tarion later would laugh. Corin did not care words. He cared behavior. The humans stopped entering marked trees casually. That was recognition in practice. One evening, Ned rode alone to outer marker. No weapon drawn. Corin watched. Ned dismounted, placed a dead goat outside line, then stepped back. Not tribute. Test. Corin approached, looked at goat, then Ned. He left goat untouched. Ned understood. Not bribery. The border did not exist because Corin was hungry. He remounted. Before leaving, he said into forest, I will keep children from the marked ground. Corin listened. And you keep away from farms. A proposed exchange. Corin could not answer. He walked to nearest marked pine. Added one claw line. Ned watched. Meaning unclear. He rode away. Corin ate goat after he was gone. Not agreement. But the farms remained untouched for weeks. Humans noticed. Ned noticed. A practical truce formed without being named. Then Joffrey arrived. Asterisk Chapter 8. Dogs refuse the trail. The second hunting party brought better dogs and worse confidence. Corin smelled them before they reached the river cut. The animals were trained for wolves, boar, and men. Their handlers had rubbed pine oil over their muzzles to confuse his scent. The oil only told Corin how close they were. He lay in a hollow under a shelf of roots while the party crossed above him. Jory Castle led the dogs. 2 archers watched the opposite slope. A boy carried a covered brazier meant to drive smoke into the burrows. The first dog stopped. Jory struck its flank, forward. The animal refused. Its claws dug into the snow, and a low whine moved through its chest. The second dog smelled Corin beneath the roots and began shaking. The men heard the sound and shifted their grips. Corin waited until the brazier was opened. Smoke poured over the root shelf. It filled his throat and made the world of heat shapes blur. The body wanted to charge. The mind remembered fire and held it down for one breath longer. Then he went through the men, not the dogs. His tail knocked the brazier into the snow. A claw opened the first archer's forearm. The second fired at the movement and struck the shield of his own companion. Jory pulled a sword and reached the hollow just as Corin climbed the exposed root. Their weapons met for half a heartbeat, steel against claw. Corin felt the blade cut the edge of one talon. Jory felt the impact through both arms. Gods, the knight breathed. Corin head-butted him into the earth. The dogs fled. One dragged its leash into the trees. The men ran after them, leaving the brazier smoking in the snow. Corin could have pursued, but the cut on his claw burned, and the smoke had taught him something important. He did not need to fear fire. He needed to respect what it did to his senses. He took the wounded archer's cloak and carried it to the river. The man's blood made a bright trail across the white surface. Corin placed the cloak on a branch high above the bank, where the wind would carry the smell toward the road. By evening, the searchers had retreated to Winterfell with no dead dogs, one missing bow, and a story that the animals had refused a trail they could still smell. Jory Castle blamed the dogs until one of them refused food for 3 days. The kennel master blamed the smoke. John blamed the men who had entered the ravine without a second route. Corin blamed none of them. He carried the stolen bow into a cave and broke it over a stone, then left the pieces beside a trail leading back toward Winterfell. The castle would receive the remains before the men had finished arguing. Corin watched the castle lights appear through the trees. The walls were thick. The people inside were not one mind. That was a weakness no wall could repair. The dogs that refused the trail became useful to Winterfell after Jory stopped blaming them. The kennel master tested them at a safe distance from Quill scent. Normal. Closer. Whine. Closer. Refusal. The dogs could detect Corin's presence or venom before men. Ned created warning use. Not hunting. If dogs refuse, patrol stops. Corin noticed. His scent had become alarm. He needed counter. Mud. Water. Pine resin. He rolled in creek. Body hated. Scent reduced. First dog failed to notice until 20 paces. Corin approached patrol from downwind water path. Dogs calm. Men relax. Then Corin shows. Panic. One dog bites handler accidentally. Corin doesn't need attack. He leaves. Humans learn scent masking possible. Kennel master changes. Dogs not soul. Visual. Tracks. Bird silence. Layered detection. Again. Corin tests smoke scent on himself after abandoned camp. Bad because smoke triggers own memory, but masks. He tolerates. Dogs confused. Then he finds strong animal dung musk. Rails. Effective but humiliating. Survival over pride. John later notices tracks with deer scent, but Scorpius claw. No sensory, signal trustworthy alone. Winterfell patrol doctrine. 3 signs before pursuit. 1 sign equals caution. 2 equals withdraw observe. 3 equals report and reinforce. Corin sees patrol, not reacting to 1 quill. He adds 2nd sign, intentionally to move them. Works once. Then humans suspect manipulation. Need 3. He can create 3. But doing so takes time and reveals pattern. Costs. 1 patrol uses dog as independent signal. Corin cannot fake dog reaction unless near. That forces actual presence. He places old quill. Dog reacts though Corin absent. Great. Kennel master notices dog reaction weaker. Creates rough distinction. Corin's tricks erode. No permanent win. Meanwhile dogs themselves become traumatized. 1 refuses forest entirely. Kennel master retires it. Ned initially says replace. Master says no. He's done. Corin observes retired dog in yard later. Could kill. Does not. No tactical value. Not mercy necessarily. Dog no longer hunts him. He targets working dogs only when needed. Humans may misread. Kennel master sees. Knows which ones chase. The monster classifies roles, not species. Because it means uniforms behavior become target markers. They start rotating handlers. Corin adapts slower. Again, humans become less legible. By war, he recognizes Banner's boots, but roles can still shift. Asterisk Chapter 9. Bran hears the trees. Bran dreamed of the Wolfswood before he dreamed of falling. In the dream, the snow was black beneath the pines. He stood barefoot on a branch high above the ground, though he could not remember climbing there. Something moved below him. He could not see its body all at once. A tail slid between trunks, quills lifted like dead leaves. One eye opened where no eye should have been. Bran tried to call for summer. The forest answered with a rasp. Far from the dream, Corin watched Winterfell from a pine bent over the outer wall. He had followed the scent of horses and smoke until the castle became a map of heat. He could feel men on the battlements, dogs in the kennels, and one small, warm body moving across a tower roof where no child should have been. The child stopped. Corin stopped too. For several breaths, the distance between them held. Bran looked into the trees. Corin looked at the stone. Neither could see the other clearly, but both felt the pressure of attention. In the dream, Bran descended the trunk. The black-spined creature waited beside a frozen stream. It had a man's patience trapped behind an animal's face, and the thought made Bran's stomach twist. "Are you lost?" Bran asked. The creature's jaws opened. No words came. Instead, the dream filled with images: a locked room, a burning door, white snow, a deer screaming, and a little girl running while something chose not to follow. Bran woke with his hands clenched in the sheets. Maester Luwin found him sitting upright before dawn. Another bad dream. Not a dream. Bran looked toward the window. There is something in the trees that knows it is being watched. Luwin asked whether he had seen a wolf. Wolves do not think like that. Outside, Corin heard the castle bells begin. He withdrew from the pine before the guards could search the wall. Bran's heat faded behind stone, but the memory of the contact remained sharp. The boy had reached without hands. Corin had no answer for that kind of intrusion. He marked the pine trunk 3 times, then moved deeper into the forest. Bran's account changed each time he told it, but one detail remained. The creature had drawn a boundary and expected him to understand. Luwin sent a raven south asking whether old northern tales mentioned beasts that could resist a dream. The answer would take weeks. Corin did not need weeks. He had already chosen the boy as a watcher, and watchers were often more useful than allies because fear kept them honest. Behind him, Bran told Luwin about the eye. He did not mention the locked room. Some part of him understood that the image had not belonged to the forest, and that whatever had brought it, they had noticed him noticing. Bran did not tell Luwin everything from the first dream, because the locked room felt private. That bothered him. Not guilt. Something like having opened a letter addressed to someone else. He asked Luwin, "Can dreams steal?" The Maester looked up from parchment. "Dreams can frighten." "That's not what I asked." Luwin considered. "People can steal through dreams, perhaps. Information, trust, sleep." Bran looked toward window. "What if I saw something I wasn't meant to?" "Then the question is what you do with it." "Good answer." Bran chose silence. For 2 days. Then second dream came. Not full. A smell. Smoke. Corin somewhere, in forest asleep. Bran found himself standing outside the warehouse door from Corin's first life. He knew it without knowing why. The door rattled. Someone inside. No voice. Bran touched handle. Hot. He pulled back. Behind him, in dream forest, Corin stood. Quills raised. Bran said, "I won't open it." The creature stopped. Not trust. Recognition. Bran sat. On dream floor. "You don't want me in there." Corin drew a line. Same as later. Bran nodded. All right. Then did something unexpected. He turned his back on door. The dream changed. Corin's pressure eased. Not because safe. Because Bran had accepted boundary voluntarily. When Bran woke, he understood first rule of contact. Do not push. He told Luwin only that. The Maester wrote, "The creature may perceive dream intrusion as trespass." Creature, Bran asked. What would you call it? Bran thought. Someone. Lewin's quill stopped. That word had consequences. If someone, then motives. Monster and person could coexist. Nor the law disliked ambiguity. Bran did not care law yet. He cared that Corrin had drawn a line instead of killing him. Later, Bran deliberately dreamed toward forest. Not entering memory. Standing at line. Corrin sometimes appeared. Sometimes not. No control. No pet. No warging. Just shared dream boundary. Bran experimented. He brought images. Winterfell. Summer. Heart tree. Corrin reacted to summer with attention. To castle with tension. To heart tree with irritation. To food with hunger. Then Bran showed open door. Corrin vanished. Too much. Bran stopped. Weeks passed. Corrin returned in dream on his own. He showed Bran something. Not warehouse. A path. 3 trees. Broken stream. Burned clearing. Bran woke. He told Lewin. They found location. Old hunter's trap. Abandoned. Unknown. At clearing, Bran's men found a poisoned carcass near trail children sometimes used. Both, perhaps. Bran realized dream communication could save lives while remaining dangerous. Lewin said, "Do not mistake useful contact for friendship." Bran agreed. He remembered line. At this point, Corrin knew Bran as Watcher who could respect boundary. That made later contacts plausible. It also gave Bran unique knowledge he refused to let Ned weaponize easily. Ned asked where warning came from. Bran said dream. Ned frowned. From the beast. Maybe. Ned wanted hunt. Bran said no. Why? Because then next time it won't show me. Ned looked at son. Bran held. A child's dream altered patrol. Power through information. Corrin would have appreciated if he knew. He did. Asterisk Chapter 10. Blood at the Wolfswood Edge. Jon and Robb chose the ravine because the cliffs narrowed the beast's movement. Corrin knew they had chosen it because a raven had carried the plan to a watchpost, and a man at the watchpost had drunk too much before speaking. He reached the ravine first and found the trap. Torches sunk into snow, a line of oil beneath the eastern shelf, and archers hidden where the wind could not carry their scent. The formation was better than Ned's first hunt. Robb had learned. Jon had learned faster. Corrin crawled along the cliff face and reached the oil line from below. He could smell the cloth wicks and the resin. Fire would come from both sides once he entered the narrow ground. The body wanted the nearest warm shape. The mind wanted the men who had built the shape. He nudged a stone down the slope. The archers turned toward the sound. Jon did not. He looked up. Corrin dropped behind the captain. The man spun with a spear already moving. The point struck Corrin's jaw and tore a strip of flesh. Pain snapped the predator loose. Corrin seized the shaft, pulled the captain into the first torch, and drove him through the oil line. Flame ran across the ravine. Heat blinded Corrin's left eye. The body recoiled from the burning snow while men shouted and arrows came through the smoke. One arrow entered the meat above his hip. Another lodged in the quill fold along his back. Jon moved through the fire with his cloak wrapped over his mouth. He reached the wounded men first, dragging one away from the oil. Robb shouted for the archers to stop, but the order arrived after another shaft struck the rock beside Corrin's skull. Corrin climbed the western wall with blood running down his flank. Jon saw him go. Their eyes met through the smoke. "It knows the trap," Jon said. Rob looked at the captain burning below them. It knows us. Corin reached the top and tore the arrow from his hip. The wound did not close quickly. He had spent too much blood escaping the fire, and the poison in his own quills made the torn flesh pulse. He left the captain's sword hanging from a branch above the ravine. The blade carried no message humans could read, but the placement did. The hunt had hurt him. It had not ended him. John found the sword before dawn. Rob found the tracks leading away. Neither followed. John carried the broken captain's sword to the edge of the ravine and left it there rather than return it to Winterfell. Rob found him sharpening the blade at dawn. Neither spoke about the moment Corin had looked down through the smoke. The hunt had ceased to be a simple task. It had become an exchange between two kinds of patience, and Corin intended to decide which one would run out first. Corin carried the burning smell for miles. He hated the fire. He hated the men who had used it. Most of all, he hated that the pain had taught him respect. The ravine fire changed John more than Rob. Rob saw tactical failure. John saw Corin bleed. A monster that bled became easier to hate and harder to mythologize. He returned, alone, days later. Not to hunt. To inspect. Ghost with him. The burned oil line still smelled. Arrow blood on rock. One torn quill lodged in bark. John used cloth to remove. Ghost growled. He rapped. Then found something else. Footprints. Corin had returned after hunt. They led to burned captain. Then away. No feeding. No scavenging. He had inspected. Learning. John followed only until first marked pine. Stopped. He placed quill on snow. Not crossed. Corin watched. John said, You learned fire. Silence. We learned you blade. Silence. That doesn't mean either of us won. Corin emerged. Ghost bared teeth. Corin looked at Direwolf. Different from dogs. Not trained through rope. Bond. Ghost stood between John and Corin without command. Interesting. John put hand on Ghost's back. Easy. Corin moved left. Ghost mirrored. Right. Mirrored. Corin stopped. He understood pair. Not master hound. At least not simple. John asked, Did you spare Arya? Corin stared. John held red cloth. Instead, John asked, Did you spare the trapper? Corin looked toward burned clearing. Yes, but cannot answer. John showed broken sword from captain. We're learning, you choose. Corin growled. Choice being known created vulnerability. If humans expected restraint, they could exploit. He lunged suddenly. Ghost moved. John drew. Corin stopped just beyond blade. Both humans, wolf and man, held. Not panic. Corin retreated. John understood the demonstration. Choice did not equal safety. He said, I know. That annoyed Corin less. John left Quill. Did not take it back to Luwin. Because he did not want every detail transformed into hunting advantage. Ned noticed. Where's the sample? I left it. Why? John hesitated. If we take everything it leaves, it stops leaving anything. Ned stared. Intelligence source management from 17-year-old. Luwin supported. Rub thought too cautious. Family disagreement. Corin's existence creating different strategic philosophies. John favored boundaries and observation. Rob active adaptation. Ned containment. Arya curiosity later. Bran dream contact. Each human becomes distinct relation. Corin watches castle responses and learns same. Winterfell isn't one mind. That is weakness and resilience. He can manipulate divisions. But divisions also prevent one bad idea owning all. He doesn't fully appreciate yet. Years later, this pattern shapes how humans survive him. For now, Jon burns one bloodied cloth instead of bringing it home. Corin sees smoke. Not wildfire. Smaller. Controlled. He stays. No traps for month. No attacks. Then war changes everything. Asterisk chapter 11. The King's Road comes north. The royal column announced itself long before the banners appeared. Horses changed the forest smell. Leather, hot iron, spilled ale, and too many bodies rolled ahead of the road like weather. Corin followed from the trees, while Robert Baratheon's men made camp beneath the pines. A dead horse lay beside the road, its throat opened and its saddle torn away. The black quill in its neck had not been fired by accident. Corin had left it there the previous night. "That is no wolf," Tyrion said from the edge of the camp. Joffrey kicked snow over the blood. "It is a wolf with an ugly habit." Cersei watched the men watching her son. Find the creature before Robert hears another version of this story. Tyrion crouched beside the horse without touching it. A clever beast would prefer the king's camp to the forest. Everyone here believes his guards are protection. Corin listened from a pine above them. He understood none of the politics in the words, but he understood the way men stepped closer to powerful people when afraid. The camp had 3 rings of guards and no quiet ring at all. After dark, a stable boy carried a bucket beyond the torch line. Corin lowered himself behind the wagon and watched the boy notice the horse tracks that had not been there before. The boy froze. Corin could have taken him. Instead, he reached through the wagon slats and dragged a royal cloak into the snow. The boy ran. Alarms rose through the camp. Men rushed toward the empty cloak while Corin climbed the wagon, crossed the canvas roof, and slipped behind the king's pavilion. Through the fabric, he smelled sweat, wine, and a sleeping man who had killed enough people to believe danger should wait its turn. Robert woke when Corin's claw pierced the tent pole. The king reached for a sword. Corin withdrew before the blade cleared its sheath. He left a quill embedded in the pole at eye level. By morning, Tyrion had seen the mark. Cersei had heard 3 different accounts. Joffrey demanded a hunt. Robert demanded breakfast. The royal camp moved its horses inside the ring of tents, and Robert's guards doubled near the pavilion. Tyrion noticed that the extra men watched the forest rather than the king. Cersei noticed too, which meant the weakness would become political before it became tactical. Corin had not killed anyone in the camp. He had done something more useful. He had made the royal family measure every shadow as if it carried a crown. Corin returned to the forest with the royal scent in his memory. Kings were not harder to reach than hunters. They were simply surrounded by more men who would die before admitting they had failed. Tyrion noticed the quill in Robert's tent pole before Cersei's guards finished arguing about how it got there. He did not touch it. That already made him more intelligent than half the camp. Robert did. Of course. Sharp little bastard. Luwin wasn't there. Northern guards shouted. Tyrion said, "Perhaps don't grip poison." Robert looked at hand. No puncture. Quill had been embedded backward. Venom tip inside wood. Safe to touch shaft. That was deliberate. Tyrion stared. It placed it so the king could touch without dying. Cersei went still. Robert laughed. Then it has manners. No. Tyrion looked at tent wall. It has audience. Joffrey demanded hunt. Cersei demanded walls. Robert demanded wine. Ned, still there during royal visit, wanted patrol routes changed. Tarion asked, different. What did it take? Everyone looked. Nothing. Tarion shook head. Then why enter? Corin had stolen cloak earlier but left. Message. Access. Proof. Not hunger. Tarion became fascinated. He placed 3 objects beyond torch line. Meat. Silver coin. Small mirror. Test. Corin found. Ignored coin. Mirror interested. He saw reflection. Not human. He struck. Mirror cracked. Tarion found next morning. Tarion said. Priorities. Ned disliked experiment. You fed it. I learned it doesn't care for silver. That does not make it safe. No, it makes bounties less useful. Good political observation. If beast doesn't value gold, bribery impossible. Cersei overheard. She had already imagined hunters. Tarion's data undermined. Then he noticed mirror. Cracked once. Not shattered completely. Corin's earlier puddle reaction. The creature perhaps disturbed by own form. Tarion stores. He starts letter notes. Not beast behavior only. Displays aversion to confinement, values control of distance, engages witnesses selectively, does not respond to wealth, may recognize symbolic objects. Corin sees him placing objects. Next night, Corin returns. Instead of taking, leaves royal cloak strip on coin. Tarion wakes. Sees. Wealth under cloth. Royal symbol covering payment. Could mean many things. Tarion refuses, overinterpret. He writes, it may understand that we are testing it and may contaminate our tests deliberately. From now humans, no Corin can manipulate observations. Luwin later appreciates. Corin appreciates that Tarion resists easy story. Makes dwarf dangerous. He chooses not to attack him. Yet, royal camp leaves. Tarion sees marked pine. Bows slightly, not submission joke. Corin watches. No response. Tarion smiles. At least one lord here knows when not to speak. That line enters unsent letter. Tarion woke before dawn because something scratched the underside of his wagon. He lay still. The royal camp had quieted hours ago. Even Robert had finally stopped laughing. Snow hissed against canvas. Somewhere outside, a horse stamped once and was shushed by a groom. The scratching came again. Slow. Deliberate. Tarion reached for the dagger beside his bedroll. Do not be stupid, he whispered to himself. Then he got up anyway. He opened the wagon flap 1 inch. Nothing. The underside scratched again. Tarion climbed down. Cold bit through his boots. He crouched and looked beneath the wagon. 2 yellow eyes looked back. Tarion froze. Corin lay flat in the shadow between the wheels, body compressed beneath timber, quills folded so tightly they seemed carved into the spine. Neither moved. Tarion became acutely aware of every story he had dismissed. The jaws were larger up close. The uneven shoulders real. The smell unpleasant. Blood, wet fur, venom, cold earth. He did not raise the dagger. Well, he whispered, you are uglier than the songs. 1 quill lifted. Tarion closed his mouth. Fair. Corin slid forward until his skull emerged beyond the axle. The dwarf backed 1 pace. No more. His instinct wanted guards. His intellect wanted to know why he was still alive. Corin looked at the dagger. Then at Tarion's hand. Tarion slowly lowered it. That better. The beast's head tilted. Not answer. But the quill lowered. Tarian's attention moved to the ground. Something lay between Corin's foreclaws. The strip of royal cloak taken earlier. Joffrey's, torn from shoulder to hem. Tarian stared. You kept it. Corin nudged it forward. Tarian did not touch. Why give it to me? The beast's tail scraped once against the mud. Tarian followed the movement. Toward the prince's pavilion. Then back to the cloth. Understanding arrived. Not gift. Connection. Corin knew the cloth belonged to someone in the royal camp. Possibly knew which someone. Tarian's amusement vanished. You can track him. The eyes did not change. That was answer enough for fear. Tarian straightened. The camp suddenly felt much more fragile. Joffrey slept behind guards, walls of canvas, and royal certainty. None of those mattered to scent. Tarian looked back at Corin. If I shout, they will try to kill you. Corin remained still. If I don't, you may eat my nephew. The head lowered closer to the snow. Tarian sighed. I dislike negotiations, where only one party has teeth. Corin pushed the cloth another inch. Tarian understood the second layer. Take it. Remove scent source. Maybe. He used dagger tip to hook the cloth rather than fingers. Corin watched. No attack. Tarian lifted it. The fabric stank of Joffrey's perfume, horse, smoke, and fear. You want this gone. Corin rose slightly. Tarian backed again. The beast slid from beneath the wagon in one smooth movement. Full size. Far worse than stories. Tarian's breath stopped. Corin stood over him. Could kill. Did not. Then turned and walked toward the dark pines. Tarian waited until the tail vanished before breathing normally. He carried the cloth to the campfire. Burned it. Joffrey found out at breakfast. My cloak. Ruined. By what? Tarian drank watered wine. Weather. Joffrey knew he was lying. Cersei knew too. Tarian refused both. He did not tell them the beast had crawled beneath his wagon. Not yet. Information was a kind of armor when everyone else believed walls mattered more. Later that morning, he walked the camp perimeter and found no tracks where Corin had disappeared. Snowfall had erased them. That bothered him more than the encounter. The beast had not needed to threaten. It had simply proved access. Tarian changed sleeping wagons that night. Not because he believed a new wagon safer. Because predictable habits had started to feel like invitations. Chapter 12. Feast Voices and Forest Fear. Winterfell feasted, while the wolfswood fed on what the feast had forgotten. Music shook the great hall. Cups passed from hand to hand. Robert laughed loudly enough to make the rafters tremble, and the laughter covered the arrival of a rider whose horse had collapsed outside the gate. Lewin brought the torn saddle into the hall. The rider is alive, he said. The horse is not. The wounds match the quills. The music thinned. Catelyn looked toward Ned. Robert stopped laughing only when he realized no one else was doing it. Send men, Robert said. Men have already gone, Ned replied. They found the tracks and lost them at the river. Joffrey leaned over the table. Then send more. I will kill the beast myself. Tyrion looked into his wine. The beast may object to being part of your story. Outside the hall, Arya listened through a cracked door while Sansa tried to pull her away. Bran sat near the hearth, pale and silent, his hands folded around a cup he did not drink. A servant carried a tray toward the hall. Corin reached through the chimney smoke and took one roasted bird. He did not touch the man. The tray returned missing only what mattered. The servants screamed anyway. Inside, chairs scraped, and guards drew steel. Corin crossed the roof with the bird in his jaws, then dropped one black quill down the chimney. It landed in the ashes before Robert's boots. The king stared at it. It was inside the castle, Catelyn said. No, Lewin answered. He studied the soot on the quill. It was above us. That distinction changed the room. Walls did not protect people from a creature that could climb them. The servant who lost the roasted bird refused to work near the chimneys again. Arya heard the story and asked whether the beast had climbed the wall. Sansa told her not to encourage such talk. Bran said nothing, but he looked toward the window. Corin watched those small reactions from the godswood and understood that the castle no longer needed a corpse to remember him. A missing object could keep a household awake just as well. Corin ate beneath the godswood and listened to the bells begin. Fear had entered the feast without a body. He preferred it that way. A dead man ended an argument. A missing bird made every servant suspect the ceiling. The feast quill did not stay in the ashes. Arya took it. Of course. She used fireplace tongs after hearing Lewin's warnings, wrapped it in cloth, hid it beneath her cloak. Sansa saw. What are you doing? Nothing. That is clearly something. Arya glared. Sansa looked at wrapped shape. You'll poison yourself. No. You don't know that. True. Arya stopped. She wanted proof. Not possession. She returned quill to Lewin. Sansa surprised. Arya said, I was going to keep it. Lewin looked over spectacles. What changed your mind? Arya looked at Sansa. She was annoying. Sansa left offended. Lewin smiled. He examined. Zud. Low venom. Quill had passed down chimney without active firing. Meaning shedding or deliberate placement. He compared growth route. Interesting. Lewin begins chart. Arya stays. Can it choose how poisonous? Possibly. Could it make one not poisonous? Possibly. Then why kill dogs? Lewin looks. Because choosing less danger does not make it kind. Arya absorbs. Outside, Corin watches roofline. The feast response is chaotic. Guards climb roofs. While everyone watches above, Corin enters stable yard low. No attack. Maps smell. He hears royal guards discussing South Road. Ned leaving soon. Human movement predictable by fear shift. He stores. One kitchen boy finds him near stable. Freezes. Corin could kill. Doesn't. Boy later tells. It looked at me and took the meat. Not hero story. Just theft. Servants adapt differently than lords. They begin leaving meat scraps outside wall to keep him away from kitchens. Ned orders stop. That feeds it. Cook says it already eats. Practical conflict. For weak, scraps appear anyway. Corin notices. Could become dependence tribute. He deliberately doesn't take 3 nights. Servants confused. Fourth, wolves eat scraps. They blame Corin. Rumor gets inaccurate. Corin sees danger of accepting regular tribute. Humans infer pattern. He stops approaching scraps entirely. Instead, hunts deer. Tyrion notices. At least the beast has better instincts than tax collectors. Robert laughs. Cersei doesn't. She asks Lewin. If it knows the castle, why doesn't it just come in? Lewin. Perhaps it does not want what is inside. Arya. Or it wants us to know it can. Asterisk chapter 13. Arya follows the wrong track. Arya followed the marks because everyone else had told her not to. The trail began beyond the practice yard, where a black quill had pierced a fallen branch. She carried Needle at her hip and moved quickly, pausing only when the snow swallowed her footprints. The marks led away from Winterfell, across a frozen ditch and beneath roots silvered with ice. Corrin smelled her before she reached the den. He was feeding on a hare and a stolen kitchen rooster. The bodies lay between his foreclaws. Arya stopped at the edge of the hollow, sword half drawn. For a moment, neither moved. The girl was small. Small did not mean helpless. She held the blade correctly enough to make the mistake dangerous. Her fear came sharp, but it did not turn her away. Corrin lowered his head. Arya's eyes moved over the quills, the torn shoulder, and the tail curled around the meat. She was measuring him. He recognized the habit. It belonged to people who survived by deciding before they were told what to think. "You killed the dogs," she whispered. Corrin clicked his teeth. "And the horse." He pushed the hare toward her with one claw. Arya did not take it. She stepped sideways instead, searching for the angle to leave. Clever. Corrin shifted to block the route, not touching her, making the intention clear. She drew Needle. The sword flashed toward his snout. Corrin turned too slowly. The point cut across the soft edge of his nose and drew a thin line of blood. Pain became hunger. He lunged. Arya fell backward and rolled beneath his forelimb. Corrin's claws struck the ground where her ribs had been. She came up running, bleeding from one hand where the sword had dragged across her palm. Corrin could have caught her before the third step. He did not. The choice angered the body. It wanted the heat and the blood. The mind wanted to know what a human child would do with a wound she had earned by attacking first. Arya reached the trees and looked back. Corrin stood beside the hare, blood dripping from his snout. He fired a quill into the snow at her feet. She understood the warning and ran harder. Arya cleaned the cut on her hand herself and hid the bloodied cloth beneath a loose stone. She did not tell Ned that Corrin had stopped with one claw at her throat. That secret became a private challenge between the girl and the forest. Corrin kept the smell of her blood in his memory, not as prey, but as a marker for a human who had tested him and refused to surrender the story afterward. Corrin ate the rooster, then the hare, then licked the blood from his nose. By nightfall, Arya had told no one the full truth. She said the beast had let her go. That was worse than saying it had missed. Arya did not go straight back to Winterfell after Corrin let her run. She stopped at the stream. Her hand hurt. Needle's grip was slick where the blade had dragged across her palm. The cut was not deep, but blood made every small injury look important. She washed it. Cold water bit. Then she heard movement behind her. Arya turned, with Needle raised. Nothing. The forest watched. She knew that was ridiculous. Forests did not watch. The beast did. She wrapped her hand badly with the edge of her sleeve and started walking. Halfway home, she found a rabbit laid in the trail. Fresh. Neck broken. No quill. No bite. Placed. Arya stopped. That thought made her angry. She kicked snow over the rabbit and kept moving. Then stopped again. Waste. She went back, picked it up by hind legs, carried it home. Not because gift, because meat was meat. At the kitchen entrance, a servant stared. "Where did you get that?" Arya said, "Found it." True enough. The rabbit became stew. No one knew. That night, she dreamed of yellow eyes beneath pine branches. Not Bran's kind of dream. Ordinary. Fear replaying. She woke with her hand around Needle. Left. Right. Point. Recover. Every time she lunged, she remembered Corrin moving faster. Needle had cut him because he had underestimated her, not because she was stronger. That distinction irritated her. She went to John, showed hand. He looked. What happened? Tree. John stared. A tree with teeth. Arya scowled. He knew. She said, don't tell father. Why? Because he'll lock me inside. John looked toward Wolfswood. Maybe he should. Arya's face hardened. John understood immediately. Wrong answer. He sighed. Tell me what happened. She did. Not everything. She admitted finding beast. Cutting it. Being spared. Left out rabbit. John listened. Did it chase? No. Could it have? Yes. Then why not? I don't know. John did not give answer. He said, unknown isn't safe. I know. Do you? Arya looked at hand. More than yesterday. John smiled faintly. Progress. He made her promise, no return alone. Arya said yes. She meant it at the time. Promises under curiosity had short lives. Before that broke, she tried something else. She placed a strip of red cloth at the first marked pine. No food. No weapon. Just cloth. Corin found it. Smelled Arya. Recognized. He looked toward castle. The body wanted follow. Mind refused. He moved cloth deeper into forest. Not to den. A second tree. Arya returned 2 days later with John, keeping promise technically. They found cloth moved. John stared. It wants us farther in. Arya said, or it moved it. Same result. They did not follow. Corin watched them stop. He learned something. Arya could obey a boundary when another person stood beside her. Alone, uncertain. Group behavior mattered. Humans reinforced restraint socially. He returned cloth to original tree the next night. Arya saw next morning. Confused. John understood less. That was intentional. Corin did not want a clean code. Clean code became command channel. If humans learned red cloth means X, they could manipulate him through it. He kept meaning ambiguous. Arya grew frustrated. Then delighted. A game without rules she could master quickly. Dangerous. She began drawing beast from memory. Badly. Long skull. Quills. Tail. No one saw except Bran. Bran looked. You made the eyes wrong. Arya turned. You've seen it. In dreams. Now both siblings had secret relation. That conversation changed Stark household quietly. Arya had physical encounter. Bran mental. They compared. Corin chooses. Corin hates mind intrusion. Corin understands boundaries. Corin still kills. No sentimental monster. When Ned later hears partial, he becomes more alarmed. Intelligent predator near children. His response escalates. Corin's decision to spare Arya thus creates future pressure. Mercy is not free. Even strategic mercy changes other side. Asterisk chapter 14. John finds the drag marks. John found Arya's blood where the wolfswood began. He followed the drops past the first pine, past a broken branch, and down into a hollow where bones had been arranged in a pattern no wolf would understand. Deer ribs pointed toward the castle. A dog's skull faced the river. The bones of the kitchen rooster rested beneath a black quill. Ghost growled. John lowered a hand, though he did not touch the direwolf. Quiet. Corin watched from above the hollow. Arya's blood still marked his snout, and the memory of the girl remained unpleasantly vivid. John smelled of horse, steel, and the same northern cold that clung to the Stark men. He carried concern instead of anger. That made him harder to read. John stepped into the hollow. You left these. Corin shifted one claw. Snow fell from the branch. Ghost snapped